In this video, we're going to compare mitosis with binary fission. You're going to tell me two things that are different about binary fission and two things that are different about mitosis from each other. And then you're going to tell me one huge similarity. So let's get started on this. So binary fission versus mitosis. So step one. In binary fission, the cell elongates by building more cell wall, so it just gets bigger. In the cell cycle, the cell grows, cell organelles divide, except for DNA. So one big difference is that in the cell cycle, there's organelles that are some membrane-bound objects that do different functions in the cell, and of course, prokaryote cell does not have any of those membrane-bound organelles. So that's one difference right there. But in both cases, they both get bigger. Step two, bacterial DNA replicates. And in addition to that, the DNA remains attached to the membrane. So here's the DNA replicating, but it's attached to the membrane. And another thing is that bacterial cells, or prokaryotes, they have these things called plasmids, which are little pieces of DNA. Right? In addition to their DNA, they have these plasmids also. And these plasmids also replicate during this stage. In the cell cycle, we have the synthesis phase, where DNA replicates also. So in both cases, they replicate. Right? Step three. For the cell cycle, that's the G2 phase, and for prokaryotes, the DNA moves toward the poles as the cell elongates. Well, in this phase, there's actually a check where it makes sure that the DNA was replicated okay and errors are fixed, and then it's also a time for the cell to grow more, get more energy, because it's going to be going through a big replication. Step four. Okay, so in a prokaryote, cytokinesis starts, and there's actually a furrow that starts forming. In mitosis, we have the whole replication of the cell, and that has many parts. So in the first case, centromeres, these things form. That does not happen in the prokaryote. Next, the nuclear membrane disappears, and again, the prokaryote doesn't even have a nuclear membrane, so it can't disappear. Next, after the nuclear membrane appears, spindle fibers appear, and these spindle fibers then line the DNA up on a midline. It's called metaphase. Meta meaning middle, right? And then the spindle fibers actually pull the DNA apart so that you get your copy DNA pulled into two separate places. And then finally, the nuclear membrane appears again, right? And then a furrow starts forming to separate the two cells. So many more steps in mitosis. And for the prokaryote, the cleavage furrow forms also. Finally, the cell wall forms in the cleavage furrow, all right, and in cytokinesis, the cell membrane forms. So one other difference, if you don't know and I haven't mentioned it, is that in a prokaryote there's a cell membrane and a cell wall. So they have two different things. They have a cell membrane right on the inside of their cell wall. So they have two different separation barriers. Whereas in the mitosis, there's just a cell wall, but they have other membrane-bound organelles inside. So finally, in both cases, two identical daughter cells are produced. So this is exactly identical to this, and this is exactly identical to this. So in both cases, you get two cells that have the same function and the same abilities as the parent cells. And that concludes the information part. So if you've not, make sure you go ahead and complete this now and tell me how two ways that binary fission is different than mitosis. Tell me two ways that mitosis is different than binary fission, and tell me one way that they are similar. If you have any further questions, see your science teacher.